Mamaya si Dabra ganun. Bubulag tayo. Ano na? Good morning, everyone. We'll start in about 3 minutes and 40 seconds. So I'm requesting everybody here in the venue to please find your seats. And we have 187 participants online via AirMeet. I'm calling all on-site participants who are outside. Will you please find your seats? We'll start in around 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Sa basketball, last 2 minutes na po, malapit na. Pwede pa pong humabol ang Ginebra kahit tambak ng 20 points in last 2 minutes. Ginebra. Ginebra talaga. Hindi matago. Last 2 minutes. Last 2 minutes, brought to you by the Legal Education Board in cooperation with the Philippine Association of Law Schools and the Asia Foundation. All right, last 1 minute, everybody. Please find your seats. May libreng tubig po. On. Magandang umaga po, magandang umaga. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our delegates here in the Grand Hyatt Hotel and hundreds more online via AirMeet. We are now at our third and final day of the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit. Again, this is Attorney Charm Nolasco from the Supreme Court and a member of the Oversight Committee on the Implementation of Rule 138A, and I will be your host for today. So in the past 2 days, there has been substantive discussions and insightful conversations as different legal education and justice stakeholders have come together to celebrate and take stock and reflect on CLEP in the Philippines. And to begin us off, may I invite on stage Commissioner Alexander Dumpa of the Legal Education Board, representing the law students sector, to provide us a synthesis of our summit so far. Commissioner Dumpa.
Maraming salamat po for the very warm introduction, Attorney Nolasco. To our honorable guests, our international partners, the esteemed members of the legal education community, our friends and our colleagues in the Legal Education Board, good morning to all of you, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. In preparing for today's remarks, I look back at yesterday's and last night's events. It began on a very high note with a very inspiring and thoughtful discussion by the Honorable Justice Philomena D. Singh on CLEP and preparing an ethical lawyer. I listened intently as Justice Singh spoke with clarity and insight that not only reiterated the importance of CLEP in the formation of skills in preparation for practice-ready lawyers, but also CLEP's role in instilling key values and ethics in those aspiring individuals who wish to be members of the legal community. Indeed, when we talk about what makes a great lawyer, let alone a good lawyer, I think everyone in this room has their own criteria to meet that standard. But similarly, I think everyone would be in agreement that being an ethical lawyer is part and parcel of what makes a good lawyer, and that we must all continue to fulfill that endeavor. Thereafter, we saw simultaneous online discussions, paper presentations, and virtual workshops from law students, law practitioners, law school deans, faculty and clinic directors, and even supervising lawyers. Truth be told, it was very difficult to choose which session to join. Perusing the programs, two things came to mind. First, it told me that the variety of topics and presentations represents our long and eventful journey since the revised Rule 138A was adopted. In research, there is that old adage that says even the lack of data is actually data. Here, we saw an overabundance of data. There were law students, law clinics, law deans, and law schools doing remarkable work for the marginalized and the disaffected. The scope of their work is wide and far encompassing, from domestic abuse victims, overseas Filipino workers victims, the wrongly incarcerated, and land disputes, to fighting climate change, assisting local government units and developments within and beyond the four corners of the classroom. Truly, we cannot help but be amazed and gratified by all the meaningful and pioneering being done in the name of access to justice. Second, I realized that events and activities such as these are very important because not only is it a platform for various voices and perspectives at every level of the legal community, but also it builds a body of scholarship that becomes the foundation and inspiration for future endeavors. May the ideas and studies from yesterday's presentation be a guide and a hope to others so that they may continue ensuring that justice is accessible and that justice is attainable. Building upon the momentum of the day, the awards night and fellowship dinner served as a perfect way to conclude the night. There, we recognize the innovative and pioneering efforts of those involved in advancing the revised Rule 138A. I want to extend my congratulations to last night's winners, to Ateneo de Naga University for showing a new and innovative use of CLEP in providing community services and access to justice, to Cagayan State University for their inspiring dedication to implement CLEP and contribute to justice despite adversities and challenges, to San Sebastian College Recoletos, who first complied with the curriculum integration process of the Legal Education Board, and finally, to St. Louis University for their adaptive use of technology in providing legal aid and clinic services, for being the law school that was able to serve the greatest number of clients, for having the first law student practitioner to take his oath for CLEP, and for having the law school clinic from where the first LSP took his oath. Let us all congratulate these victories as achievements not just for the winners, but for all of us, working in advancing CLEP and access to justice. Finally, I want to conclude by saying that the way forward is clear and the challenge is before us all. Let us do great and meaningful work together. Once again, let us all work in unison to ensure that the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice for all of us. Maraming salamat po. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Dumpa. We have 213 participants online via AirMeet. Hello, everyone. Indeed, we have come far, and there are more summits to climb. And so we look forward to the future of CLEP here in the country. And speaking of next steps, we will take in the development of CLEP in the country. Let us have our panel discussion this morning, focusing on building the CLEP network, the law clinicians and the LASPs, or the law practitioners, and the law student practitioners. The next panel reflects on the partnerships forged by law clinics with various legal aid service providers and organizations, engagement of Philippine law schools with international institutions, and insights gained during the Externships 11 conference held in October 22. The discussion will cover the definition and conceptualization of the CLEP network, benefits and considerations in building the CLEP network, for example, clinicians, externship placement, and etc., anticipated challenges in the process of building the network, and best practices and strategies in addressing these, and the possibility of building and strengthening the CLEP network in the Philippines. So may I now call on our moderator for this panel, Mr. Guillier Christopher Lambug, Program Officer of the Asia Foundation. TOF manages and oversees access to justice and legal reform programs of the foundation, among other tasks. His main portfolio is a legal aid project, but he is also involved in various justice, accountability, and human rights projects covering program ideation and development, project management, instructional design, and stakeholder management and partnership building. He has been in the development sector for 10 years and has extensive experience in working with and in government and non-profit organizations. TOF has a Juris Doctor degree from the University of the Philippines. He is also serving as member of the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit Organizing Committee. TOF, you may now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Attorney Charm, and good morning, colleagues in clinical legal education. I'm Toff. I'm from the Asia Foundation Legal Aid Project, and it's my absolute honor and pleasure to be in the company of like-minded and like-hearted people from all over the Philippines and all over the globe. How's everyone doing? Awake? Third day, okay. Can we get a thumbs up or a heart sign for those who are here? And for those who are online, please, can we get a reaction from everyone? Because we know that we have online participants also. So good morning, everyone. So the last panel session is all about community. 2 months ago, some of us here were very fortunate to have witnessed firsthand how a community of externship directors and clinicians can engage as a robust network. For the Filipinos attending the Externships 11 conference in California, it was amazing to see externships directors and law professors from all over the US come together to share their experiences and innovative practices in running their programs, discussing policy developments and how these can affect their clinical legal education, talk about the difficulties they go through, and find succor in one another, and together find solutions to the most pressing concerns of the community. We can't help but think that this could be us in a few years' time. Or maybe this is us now, actually, in informal and smaller pockets, just waiting to be scaled up. They have the American Association of Law Schools as much as we have the Philippine Association of Law Schools, or PALS. They have the Clinical Legal Education Association, or CLIA. And we're happy to have our colleagues from TAFLAO, who is, of course, building their network also of CLEP practitioners through BABSICLE. But we may not have CLIA yet, but of course, the externships community in the US took decades to build. And based on our sharing this summit, there are a lot that have been done already in the past 3 years. And what we need to do is come together and talk about the community. Now, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce the members of the panel. Our first member is the Dean of the St. Louis University Law School, School of Law in Baguio City. She's a former member of the Supreme Court Oversight Committee and currently a member of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Association of Law Schools. And she's a certified public accountant, heavily engaged in tax advisory, tax compliance services. You should go to Baguio and see her tax practice. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Tin Carantes. Next, we have the Dean of the University of St. La Salle in Bacolod City. She's a member of the Oversight Committee. She teaches civil law and also coached the USLS Moot Court team in international moot competitions. She's currently the Vice President for the Visayas of the Philippine Association of Law Schools. Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Roseanne Gonzaga. Our next member is very familiar to many of us, but online, and we're very happy to have her now in person. She's a professor and Dean of Experiential Learning at Vermont Law School and Graduate School, which is a law school in the United States that is known for its strength in environmental law, restorative justice, and experiential education. It's also a school known for collaborative work and strong partnerships, including the US-Asia Partnership for Environmental Law. She is a trainer and mentor at the CLEP Training Program Executive Course on Externships, alongside, of course, Professor Nicole and everyone, Professor Stephanie. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Beth Locker. Our next panelist is a professor of law and lawyering program director at the City University of New York School of Law, and this fall, a visiting professor of law at the University of the Philippines College of Law. He was previously co-chair of the American Association of Law Schools section on clinical legal education and associate dean for clinical and experiential education, mediation clinic director, and externship supervisor at the University of Montana School of Law. He has collaborated with law schools, clinicians, and legal service providers in Thailand, Vietnam, China, and Spain on clinical legal education and access to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Eduardo Capulong. Our next panelist is someone we would have wanted to be here on site, but we're very lucky to have him online. He's a clinical professor of law and assistant dean of the clinical education and global programs of the Pepperdine University Caruso School of Law. He directs the program of clinical education, including the legal clinics, externships, pro bono programs, and practicum courses, and the global programs in Pepperdine. He supervises and teaches the Community Justice Clinic and other courses. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Jeff Baker joining us online from LA. Good evening, Professor Jeff. And finally, we know him from day one, who taught us to plant kalabasa. Among many others, he's a co-founder and director of Babsicle, and a co-founder of the International Organizing Committee member of the regionally and globally led Asia Pro Bono Consortium and Conference. He has worked as both an academic and as director of Babsicle in universities in Myanmar, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, the Lao PDR, the Philippines, and Indonesia, Australia, and the United States, essentially representing the Asian Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bruce Lasky. So whether you're here on site or joining us online, please join the conversation. Okay? For our live participants, you may write down your insights and questions, give them to any of our production team. And for those joining us online, please post your thoughts, your messages, and your questions for the panelists. We'll have an opportunity for that later on. Okay. So we've all read the Revised Law Student Practice Rule, and we know that it provides for, the Revised Student Practice Rule contemplates both law clinics and externships. So this is the definition of
law clinics and externships. And we know that learning activities covered under the rule may be undertaken either through a law clinic and an externship. And based on our learning from the Externships 11 course, it's a potent tool for us to convene the members of the community. And just so we are reminded of the definitions of externships and law clinics. Next slide, please. So there are two ways that CLEP may be delivered. It's through a law clinic and externship. And with that, we would like to ask Dean Rosan Gonzaga from USLS, what's your practice in externships and what's its value to law students?
The principal purpose of establishing the CLEP program of LaSalle Bacolod is to ensure there is access to justice and that we need to instill the values of professional social responsibility and practice readiness of the lawyers or aspiring lawyers. To achieve these noble objectives under the revised Student Practice Rule or revised Rule 138A, the school has incorporated into its curriculum CLE 1 and 2, and this entails practice-based learning approach with CLEP partners and supporters.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Dean Rosan. May we ask Dean Tin of St. Louis University, can you share us more about your law clinic and your externships practice?
Thank you, Tom. Student practitioner through the supervision of the supervising lawyer. And thankfully, because of the externship conference, thank you, the Asia Foundation, we were able to realize that there's really a difference between a law clinic and an externship program. And this is why we submitted before the Legal Education Board an application to offer a new elective entitled externship. The reason why we did not intersperse it with the clinical legal education as a standalone subject is because we realized through the conference that the pedagogy of the clinic will be different from the pedagogy of the externship. And through this speech, as you can see, we did not do it alone. We did it through the help of our partner organizations, the GoJust and the Asia Foundation, through the assistance, of course, of the Legal Education Board. And I will use a term in taxation, lifeblood. We will not do it without the lifeblood of the Legal Aid Office, and the lifeblood would be the students, not the law student practitioners.
Thank you, Dean Tin and Dean Rosan. So we've been discussing externships, and we know that externships is a tool to convene placement organizations, law schools, and connect and form a network. We're curious about your experience in the City University of New York, your program, and your experience in building the network in the community, Professor Capulong.
Sure. Hi. First of all, magandang umaga sa lahat. Thank you for having me here. I really appreciate the invitation, especially the Asia Foundation, Toph, Carol, and the LEB chair, Trinidad. Salamat po. It's really exciting to be part of this next phase of your journey. As you know, we've been doing a lot of work in clinical legal education for decades now sa US. And of course, part of the benefit of being in the last panel is we've heard you talk about clinical education for 3 days, in addition to the Bacolod Conference and Access to Justice, of course. So to answer Tov's question, we at the City University of New York, we founded our law school specifically with a twofold mission. One is to pursue social justice, and secondly is to provide access to marginalized students. And our program has been clinical from the start. In fact, my project at the law school, and in fact in my previous law school, is really to clinicalize the entire curriculum. And so I know that right now, mostly our clinical experiences have been in the 3rd year or the 4th year if you're part-time. But I do believe that when we think of clinical programs and externships, we should really think about the entire curriculum. There are a lot of ways that we can use the clinical method in the 1st year, the 2nd year, and the 3rd year. And so when I think back at our conversations these past few days, I think we have broad consensus on access to justice, on skills training, etc. But I do think that we need to be very, very mindful and equally concentrate on the fact that our project is not just about that. Our project is about the reform of the entire legal curriculum. As my colleague Dede talked about, it's not just about reimagining the curriculum, it's about changing and transforming legal education here and elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Attorney Capulong. Professor Beth, can we hear about your program at Vermont Law School?
Sure. Thank you, Toph. And thank you all for having me here. It's been such a pleasure to work with you online over the past 2 years, and now to be here and meet so many of you in person. I did, when Toph offered to let me put up a few slides, I gave him just 2. And so this first one is just the logo for my school, Vermont Law and Graduate School. And yes, for those of you who originally met me 2 years ago online, it was just Vermont Law School at the time, and we have changed our name. But I put this up because the school itself does have a robust experiential education program. We have a bunch of clinics, 11 different clinics or projects, mostly in-house clinics or projects focused heavily on environmental topics, an environmental law clinic, an environmental justice clinic, something focused on energy, on food and ag, things of that nature. But we also have more traditional legal service clinics focused on issues affecting veterans, family law, domestic violence, things of that nature, immigrant and migrant rights. But then the piece that so many of you have heard about from me is our externship program, which is very robust. More than 3/4 of our students will do an externship before they graduate out in the field in all sorts of different placements. But then what I really actually want to talk about just a tiny bit more, because I think of, even though Vermont Law and Graduate School is who issues my paycheck, I really think that I work in a much bigger context. So there is just one other slide, which maybe I can move to and maybe not. There we go. This, I feel like, is actually where I work and who I work with. It's a much, much broader Vermont Law and Graduate School, but in the top corner, top right corner, you can see that little tree, and at the bottom it says NEXT, and that actually stands for the New England Externship Collaborative. Vermont is a state that's in the northeastern part, in the New England region in the United States, and so all of those, almost all of the law schools in New England come together once a month, and we work together to find our students externships and to help each other with our work, and we're going to talk more about that as this panel goes on. CLIA, you're going to hear more about that. That is all of the clinical law programs that work together. Down in the bottom left is LexTern Web. That's all of the externship professors. The bottom right is AALS, the American Association of Law Schools that you've already heard mentioned. And then I love that I added CLEP, you guys, that's the logo here, because I've become a wonderful part of this clinical community. So I really feel like this is who I work with. These are the people, because as we've talked about over these last 2.5 days, this is about educating our students, creating a program that is a quality way to educate law students. I think unless we have clinical legal education, it is not quality legal education if we are going to create practice-ready ethical lawyers. And so this is essential, but it is also the way that we really make sure we spread this far and wide. And so I'm just delighted to be here. And so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Beth. And may we ask Bruce Lasky, how about your experience in network building in Asia?
So thanks, everyone. And again, it's a pleasure to be here today. We can talk about pumpkin seeds and kalabasa again. And I think we go back to the pumpkin seeds and the network building. I and our organization have been assisting in the development of strengthening of clinical legal education programs for 20 years, and I've been involved for more than 30 in my own experience. I can say that the network is really strong. There's a great network within Asia. I know that today we looked at a lot of U.S. models. I would say that I would be wary of that in a lot of ways because a lot of those models may be where you want to be in 40 years, but not now. And I think that in the strengthening of what we're all doing together, I finish marathons. I don't run marathons. I finish marathons because if I run them, I would die and never finish them. And I also run marathons because I have no sense of direction and I get lost all the time. So I keep going and going and going and going. And that's what this path is. This is a constant going path. There is no end to this path. But you need to go slowly, surely, not necessarily straight. And I've been taught this in a lot of countries that to go straight is not the way to go. Often going sideways and backwards and around is actually how to move forward. But that has been our experience in working with partners in many programs, including the externship programs, which in my opinion are some of the most valid type of clinical education programs we talked about on Monday about the goals that help to achieve the goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you for pointing out that this is actually a marathon that we started running, and to share with us their marathon in the U.S. and in CLEA. May we call on from LA, Professor Jeff Baker. Could you share with us the program at Pepperdine, and could you give us a background on the ALS and CLEA, things that we could learn from you?
Yes, and good friends, I am sad not to be with you today. I had every intention of being there in person, but had some family matters that have kept me here. So thank you for your warm hospitality. I know I have many friends in the room, and so grateful to be with you. Thank you for the honor and the privilege of the invitation to join you. I miss you, and I hope that you're having a wonderful summit. Tov said I had 3 minutes. I can't do much in 3 minutes, so I'm just going to go fast after I have expressed my love to you. I think that building a community of clinicians and clinical programs in law schools is important for three principal reasons. One is that it helps us build a movement. I feel like with Rule 138A, the Philippines has made a massive leap forward, just a huge jump. In the United States, the clinical movement is probably 60 years old, and it has nothing compared to the sort of innovation of Rule 138A. So very well done. But building a community and working together allows us to advance that movement in some really, really important ways. And I think that movement is to accomplish a few things. One, it is to gradually build up our capacity to do this work well, to convince our colleagues and our community about the importance of this work and the goals that we have, and then within our own schools to move clinical education into a central part of the curriculum of the student's experience and not just as an interesting marginal elective on the side. What we are doing ought to be central to students' formation, and that requires a movement among all of our law schools. Number two, building a community is very important for developing faculty and teaching each other how to do this and to do it well. When I started in this work 17 years ago, I was at a very small school, a regional, rural, not wealthy school that did not have a developed clinical program, and there was no one there to teach me how to do it. And it was the community that I am about to share with you that helped teach me how to do it. It connected me to mentors and to friends like Beth Locker and those of us who are new to this to teach us how to do it. And number three, to develop our own programs to learn from each other. Sometimes law schools are in competition. One thing that Beth mentioned, which I will concur with, is that clinical programs, at least among our community, are extremely collaborative. We are not concerned about prestige and hierarchy. Everyone is very generous in giving each other what we can do. So as I jump into my slides, I will talk about what we do in the U.S., but I want to agree with something that Bruce just said. I'm not offering our U.S. model as an example for the Philippines to follow, but rather just as a snapshot of some of our institutions that have developed over the last 50, 60 years that nurture us now. As you've heard, we have the Association of American Law Schools, which is a counterpart to your Philippines Association of Law Schools. And within the AALS is a section on clinical legal education. So a specialized section. It's one of the largest. It's one of the most active. It is sort of the institution within the institution of law schools that give structure and organize a lot of conferences, which is very important. I'll talk about that in a minute. We also have the Clinical Legal Education Association, or CLEA, and this is an independent, nonprofit, NGO-style organization that exists not within the institution of legal education, but alongside it. CLEA's point, its mission is to advocate for clinical education. Sometimes we are outsiders pushing in and advocating in that way. I currently serve on the board and have been president in the past of CLEA, which is the largest independent association of law professors in the United States. As Beth mentioned, we have communities of externship consortiums. She mentioned NEXT. I will mention these two in California, the Bay Area Consortium on Externships and SoCalX, which serve to exchange a lot of resources, a lot of ideas, a lot of community, especially when it comes to dealing with field supervisors and developing networks of places where our students can work. The AALS and CLEA develop a lot of conferences like this summit where you are right now, which we find to be just extraordinarily important. We have three basic national conferences, the AALS Clinical Conference, which is in the spring, the CLEA New Clinicians Conference, which is every other year at the AALS conference, and externships, and we just had externships 11, externships 12 will be in 2 years. We have regional conferences, for example, the Southern Clinical Conference, Midwest, Northwestern Clinical Conferences, and at each of those conferences, we have a lot of professional awards, which highlight and celebrate clinicians and clinical programs, and I think that is very important for developing community and highlighting our work together. Within our clinical community in the U.S., we have a fairly robust communication ecosystem where we can communicate all the time. We have email listservs for Law Clinic and Lextern. The Law Clinic listserv is an email listserv with somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 members. It's our principal way of communicating with each other for announcements, for questions, for troubleshooting, for sharing news, and the like. Lextern does that work for externship-focused programs, and then CLEA and the AALS both run newsletters multiple times a year on news among clinicians and clinical programs. I know I'm going very fast. Also in that ecosystem is the Clinical Law Prof blog, which I help edit, and then the Lextern website, which specializes in externship work, as Beth mentioned earlier. I'm going fast. We also have the Clinical Law Review, which is a publication, a joint publication between NYU Law School, CLEA, and the AALS section, which develops scholarship for and about clinical education by clinicians. And that has been a stalwart pillar of our community for decades and really advances our work. The Center for the Study of Applied Legal Education, called CSAIL, does triennial surveys of all of our programs, which develops a lot of accessible data that then we all use to help advocate for ourselves within our law schools. It's a study of clinics at a scientific level. And that is the end of my PowerPoint. I know that we're going to talk about these things earlier. I don't know if that was 3 or 5 minutes, but that's it for me for now. Thank you, team.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you very much to our panelists for making that opening statement. And so far, we've seen that how the structure is important, how definitions matter. We've seen also that context is important. We've seen communications taking a central role in forging this network. But before we dive deeper into this conversation, I'd like to ask, how do we really define the CLEP network? So in terms of the community, in terms of the clinicians, legal aid service providers. Dean Roseanne?
Thank you, Toph. I'd like to say that I'm so impressed with how the U.S. has really developed your externship program. I've listened to all of you during our conference at Pepperdine University, and I want to tell you how inspiring these words we're hearing today and what we've learned in the U.S. at that time of the conference. So much planning goes into developing a CLEP externship program. I have to tell you that in USLS Law in Bacolod City, a small school with a population of only 170 students. In my first year, we only have about 40 to 50 that join the law school. The CLEP program is actually offered and enrolled in the third year for us. And so in 2 semesters, my students are supposed to complete 240 hours. By accepting the invitation, and thank you to the Legal Education Board and to the organizing committee, the Asia Foundation, with whom we have a MOA, we have now a budding CLEP program in its infancy stage. However, we have our practice that reaches our community, our local community of the marginalized sectors, the underserved sectors. Let me tell you more about them. I had forged partnerships with the IBP, Office of Legal Aid, for legal aid services, so we are able to go on field work with them. Together with that, we also have court practice with the RTC and the MTCC for court procedure, court administration, and legal documentation. Further, we went into partnerships with the Justice Zone of Bacolod City, which has brought us to the forefront of legal issues, important legal issues such as awareness for drug-related cases and its implications and the detriment that it does to society, for example. So we've worked with many socio-civic organizations, together with many of the local, regional government offices that have legal services, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission. We also have seminars with the Department of Agriculture, because we are an agricultural city, or our community is actually heavily invested in land, tilling the land, and we do have concerns with persons who are with problems, legal issues in relation to property holdings. So that's a big issue with us, and we need to have our own law school practitioners understand what are our local concerns. Another agency that we've actually worked with is Chameleon Foundation, an agency that actually protects women who have been abused, young ladies who have been abused. We also have technology-based practice, service-oriented practice, such as eDalaw. So we've actually accepted invitations to learn what is eDalaw, what is video conferencing. We learned about terms but never use them. So our law student practitioners now have used these technologies. The Supreme Court encourages video conferencing, and now we are able to do it. We are able to go to court, we bring our students to court, and it is demonstrated live in person what is video conferencing and speaking to someone deprived of liberty. So this is actually the community that we're talking about. The school, our partnership with the CLEP providers, Justice Zone, the court, the IBP, and all the civil society institutions. Together with that, we have the precious resource of whom? The very students that provide legal assistance and the promotion of access to justice. With the supervising lawyers, my alumni, whom I've recruited to join our CLEP program, whom also joined me in the training provided by the LEB and the TAF. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dean Rosan. That's a very impressive roster of partners. Of course, enabled by the rule and existing structures. Galing. Attorney Capulong, could you share with, how do you define a CLEP network based on your experience?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, we're seeing each other as a community here, right? So we've clearly seen our network the past few days. But let me just say that we are a global movement. So it's important to note that our network is actually global. There are indigenous roots of clinical legal education all over the world. The first wave, I think, happened in the US, in the UK, in Africa, and Australia. But since then, since about a few decades ago, it has grown to nearly all parts of the world. So we actually had a Global Alliance for Justice Education, which is a global clinical education conference here in 2008 in Ateneo Law School. So it's really important to think of our community as a global community. But I think it's also important to point out, as the Dean says, that our community includes some of the key stakeholders of our community, includes law students. I was very pleased to see that law students are institutionalized in their voice in this project. But the other thing that I wanted to just say is that in terms of our community, we need to really pay equal attention to the clinical faculty and the faculty of the law school, because as I mentioned, our project is of course about access to justice, of course about skills training, but it's also an academic project. And so in terms of sustainability, as Bruce is saying, because this is a marathon, although I may be a little bit more impatient than he is, I don't think we have 40 years. I'm not entirely sure the world is going to look like this in 40 years. I think we have to have more of a sense of urgency around that. But key to that, and for the sustainability of our movement, is clinical faculty, law faculty, and our partners in the community. I think we need to figure out a way how to institutionalize the voice of our communities in the clinical legal education movement, because, and here's the last thing that I'll say, because I think this entire project really begs the question of what is the purpose of legal education, right? Why are we doing this to begin with? It's not about passing the bar. It's not about just memorizing the law and figuring out and just acquiescing to the legal system. It's about changing the legal system to deal with our problems today. Climate, right? Indigenous peoples' issues, women, LGBTQ community, poverty, war. These are the questions that our law students and our lawyers are facing and need to deal with. That is the big picture. And so we need to think about and reframe and transform legal education in order to deal with that.
Thank you very much. That's a very important insight, Attorney Capulong. Thank you for showing us the big picture and drawing us back to the stakeholders, the main stakeholders, which are the students. But we've talked about the global context. Dean Tin, in terms of inter-school connection in the Philippines, how do you think the CLEP network can be defined?
Well, with respect to the inter-school relationship, I think the Philippine Association of Law Schools is always ready and available to assist other law deans nationwide. And I had seen that the leadership is really empowered to implement a clinical legal education program. Aside from this, building friendships among deans is really, really important. In fact, we learn a lot from other deans just by adding them on Facebook, and you can see their newsfeed. You can get ideas, like if Dean Schwade will post something on Facebook and I had seen that that is a brilliant idea, I will definitely copy it. And so building friendships is really important. And I would like to repeat again what Professor Jeff had mentioned earlier. It's not competition, it's really collaboration. And if all deans nationwide will collaborate, we will definitely build stronger links to our external stakeholders and create stronger legal aid projects. Thank you, Toff.
Thank you very much, Dean Tin. We have a quotable quote again for today. We'll go back to that. But for now, Bruce, you have extensive experience working in Southeast Asia. How do you think that network can be defined based on those?
Yeah, so not repeating what's been said, because I think I would agree with everything that's been said, except for one thing. I keep hearing the word project. CLE CLEP is not a project. Projects end. It's a program, okay? That's what the P is. It really is a program. Projects end. So I would suggest shifting the terminology, because in people's brains they think, and this is not, this is that continuous marathon. But not repeating, but adding to it. I think what's, as part of the community, what is absolutely vital, and I think we have our Lao delegation here, the alumni are so important in the community. If we look in Lao and also in the Philippines, some of the real movers and shakers now in Lao that are really open to support are people that have been involved and have graduated through the clinical programs. We hear these in all the countries. So alumni are a vital community. And one thing that I haven't heard yet is the private sector. You absolutely need to engage the private sector as part of your community. And when we're looking at things like the ESGs and others, it is vital. Link into them, look at graduates that become in-house counsel in the private sector and connect them into your community, because they're such a core component for long-term sustainability. And the private sector could be a problem, or they could be a real part of the solution, and you've got to connect them into your community.
Thank you very much, Bruce. And we've been talking about what comprises the network. But let's go back to why it's important. Beth, Professor Beth, why do you think establishing a network is that important?
Yes, thank you, Toff. In terms of what the benefits are, I think we've touched them slightly, so I will only just take a moment. Professor Jeff did a lovely job, I think, of hitting on, or starting to touch on, one of the very most important benefits of having a network, and that is really allowing for the creation of high-quality, pedagogically sound program of legal education. Advancing that clinical legal education is a central part of legal education. You can't have legal education you can't have good legal education without clinical legal education is essential. And when we have these networks, we can combine resources, time, talent, collective voice, and we can do it well. So I think that is one of the key elements of benefits of building a network. And the second one we've touched on in several ways, including Dean Tin just mentioned it, but these networks establish a mechanism for building community, for developing clinicians ourselves. We learn from each other, we come together, and we organize conferences. We share in more informal ways over social networks, through newsletters, Facebook, etc. And that is ways that we share information about our programs, but we also support each other. We've heard about so many of these programs and so much of the work we do. So much of this does end up being about providing access to justice, and a lot of this work touches on difficult subjects. There's a lot of vicarious trauma. There's a lot of difficult work. We are exhausted. We are all overworked. And so building that network of support is also essential so that we can keep doing this important work. So I really think those are two of the truly essential benefits that come from this, is institutionalizing the essentialness of clinical legal education as a central piece of legal education itself, and then building that community support network.
Thank you very much, Professor Beth. You mentioned about how central legal education is in looking at the benefits of establishing a network. And Attorney Capulong also mentioned that like we draw back to legal education as the motivation of legal education at the core. Professor Capulong, why do you think CLEP network is important?
Well, perhaps, perhaps the answer is obvious, right? I mean, we would not have been successful as a global clinical movement were it not for the network that we have. In the US, the reason that I emphasize the centrality of faculty and of clinical faculty is that we wouldn't have gotten this far in the United States without the Clinical Legal Education Association, without the section on clinical legal education in the ALS. So I think it is important to think about the network, but also to think about the main agents of change within that network, because we're a vast network, right? We have legal services providers, we have law schools, we have the Legal Education Board, we have the Supreme Court, we have foundations, we have a lot of people in our network. But I think, and we have a shared sense of purpose, but I think that it's really important to identify the people who are going to move us forward, right? In some of the areas that may be overlooked for now, right? And my own beef is that we need to think about this as a curricular project. We need to think about clinics as courses in the law school and not just appendages where we give legal services. That's very important, but we need to do the clinical legal education programs in the law school as courses that we offer with supervision, with seminars, with training, as Beth is talking about, with deep pedagogical roots.
Thank you, Attorney Capulong, and I can see Com Jojo very happy with that statement. We've heard from Professor Beth the value of from Professor Capulong getting back at the core of legal education, and then Professor Beth saying the practical benefits also of establishing a network. For our Philippine law deans, how do you think can we optimize these learnings, or how can we employ these benefits for our Philippine schools? Dean Tin?
These benefits can be optimized, of course, through the diversity in the area of practice of different law schools. And I'd like to borrow the idea raised by Professor Bruce yesterday. He mentioned about the idea of creating specializations of different law clinics, and that's actually a brilliant idea. And so knowing these diverse areas of practice of different law clinics will create specializations for all these law clinics, and we can make a referral network for this area. Also, these benefits that we get from the CLEP network is really important in building formal infrastructure and processes for the different law clinics worldwide. So, I mean nationwide first. And so I think all that we need to do is disseminate the information regarding the availability of all these resources that our partner organizations are very willing to deliver.
Thank you, Dean Tin. So Dean Tin laid out some steps that we can take to maximize the benefits of network. Professor Jeff, do you have anything to say? I'm sorry, we didn't forget you. We miss you, and please feel free to share your thoughts.
I wanted to add one thing, Toff and friends, and this is also critical to everyone else's comments. I think the one of the richest values of community building and network building and capacity building across a national community is the development of teachers. Eduardo was just talking about the need to move these clinical programs as courses into the curriculum, which I strongly believe. Beth and I have had the opportunity to help participate with you all over the last year or so about developing sound pedagogy in externships and in in-house clinics. And that pedagogy is a very particular kind of teaching. And traditional, in the US, we sometimes call our other colleagues on the other side of the building podium professors, because all they do is stand in front of a podium and lecture. And that is a very specific kind of teaching. Our podium colleagues, we love them, but they just teach in class and they write and they research. That's fine. But teaching through clinics in the practice of law, access to justice for pro bono, for social justice advocacy, for teaching lawyers is a different kind of pedagogy. And no one is around to teach us how to do this. We don't learn how to do this work without a network around us. If the Philippines are just getting started in this marathon, you need some athletes and some coaches to help teach young teachers how to teach it. I'm gonna guess and project with Beth and me. I think that we are in the third generation of clinical law professors in the U.S. And it's taken a long time to develop a sense of developing teachers who can come along. And I think it's a real value in developing these things because, as my colleagues on the panel have said, most of us are lonely at our law schools. There are faculties of size, but usually far fewer clinicians at any particular school. And so teaching each other and learning how to do this work together is vital to sustaining the movement and making those courses and clinics more effective. Thank you for not forgetting me, Tov.
It won't just be me. The club community in the Philippines won't forget you. And of course, our panelists. Uh, and on that note, we actually have a question which may be good to cover now. Attorney Capulong mentioned about how the network can address pressing issues, global pressing issues. And the question is confronting contemporary issues like climate change, LGBTQI rights, or data privacy require sustained multisectoral national campaigns. How can law schools build and tap into networks outside lawyers to collaborate and contribute to these campaigns? So anyone can address that. So again, how can the schools build and tap into networks outside the lawyers to collaborate and contribute to these campaigns? Yes, Dean?
From a basic law school bound point of view, let me begin with we have gender and development. This is a campaign of the government, the lab, the Supreme Court. In the school, we have our colleges, the undergraduate colleges, also in support of the gender and development program. The law school has also been tapped to join the campaign. And what we do is we work together with the different undergraduate colleges and we contribute what we know about how we can promote, for example, the idea of the awareness of protection under the Safe Spaces Act, for example, not to be harassed, anti-bullying, in terms of respecting everybody's choice, that there is no more separation between sexes, male, female, but an acknowledgement and the respect for the persons and the identities that present themselves in school. So from the basic or the lowest level, which is the school grounds, the law school, together with the undergraduate colleges, have mounted a campaign. In fact, we just started an 18-day campaign against gender bias. And we're very happy to let you know that we've been at the forefront together with our colleges in campaigning not only in school but also outside in our local community.
Thank you for sharing that, Dean Roseanne. So there's really a drive towards collaboration within the institution. So beyond the law school. I wonder if we have the same trajectory in Asia and in the US.
Yeah. So again, I think interdisciplinary programs are very, they're incredible. I mean, and we look at globally, they really work, connecting in health, environment, and such. With a slight shift from that, I would also suggest that that it's important to bring in civil society partners that are involved in different areas that we talked about. So when you're having these type of summits going forward, I think it's important to bring in your community partners that are maybe focusing in different areas of civil society, because often they don't know about this. I can tell you how many times I will talk to people doing great work and I'll tell them about clinical programs at law school and they're like, we had no idea. We had no idea. We thought law schools are just producing out greedy graduates. So, and that has to be part of this community. And bringing them into these type of gatherings, like these summits, I think is vital.
One of the things I will say too is one of the reasons I love externships is clinics are often focused on a topic or a certain population, and externships can be broader because the students can go out into other areas. I know right now in the Philippines you are limited geographically to where your students can go, but I also know there are conversations, and that may someday change. It may not, but it might. And so, like, my students often, students come to law school with different interests. And so some students want to work on issues of violence against women, but others come and want to work on issues of climate change. Others come and want to work on issues of LGBTQ rights. And if they have opportunities to do externships, it is possible that they could be placed with attorneys throughout the region who are doing that type of work. And so that when you set up an externship program, it is possible that you have that flexibility to let them do that work. But the other thing is, by instituting these CLE programs, you are creating law students, law graduates, with the skills to go out and change these things. So you will have lawyers with the ethics, with the drive, with the skills to make all of these things better. So we're setting ourselves on the path to do that work.
In the U.S., we actually have a tradition of lawyering called community lawyering, social justice lawyering, people's lawyering, rebellious lawyering, which is very intertwined with the clinical legal education movement. And I know here you also have that tradition. You have the alternative law groups, you have the National Union of People's Lawyers. This is all over the world, right? And so the idea there is to train lawyers to work with communities and in working with those communities to actually hone their skills, not only their legal skills in court, but also in working with organized groups in order to effectuate that change. And so I think when we think of curricular reform, when we think of training lawyers, I know that a lot of our law schools, I suspect Pepperdine, Vermont, CUNY Law School does the same. We not only train them in being good lawyers, qua, lawyers in court, we also train them how to work with communities and how to have the big picture in mind, because long-term change, as we know, is not going to come about only by legal reform or lawyering. It's going to come about in partnership with organizations who are trying to do those kinds of things.
Thank you very much. We just an update. We now have 257 online AirMeet participants. Again, if you have questions, you could always write your questions on a piece of paper for those who are here. And for those who are online, please feel free to post your questions on the chat box. It just feels like Zoom, although this is not a paid advertisement of Zoom. Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Let's try to backtrack a bit. We've been talking about the benefits of creating a network. We're talking about the steps on what we could do to establish a CLEP network here in the Philippines. But based on your experience, what has been the challenges? What have been challenges that you've encountered in establishing your network? Are there important learnings that we can share to Philippine law schools? Bruce?
Yeah, so thanks. And I actually asked if I can talk about the challenges, because often when we talk about challenges, we like to turn them around and turn them into opportunities. So we say, identify if you have a funding challenge, that's not a challenge. That teaches you how to run a sustainable program that doesn't require a lot of funding. But with that, I will say probably one of the biggest challenges that I've seen regionally in the Asia region and globally 30 years is that too often clinical legal education programs are confused, and we said this on day one, with legal aid. And I understand in your rule you call it legal aid clinics, and that's okay, but again, as we said on day one, they're educational programs. And too often they're confused with legal aid clinics, where the main goal there is to service communities. Clinical legal education's the first goal is the education for the students, just like we're talking about setting up the curriculum. So you need to shift that. And that can be a challenge. Even last night when we had the awards ceremony, I loved hearing about all the things. But when I heard about the numbers, and the numbers are about the clients that you serve, you should be leading with the number of students that you're graduating out of these programs. That's the first thing to talk about. And then say, and then these students immediately are serving the community. And long into the future on this marathon, think about those pumpkin seeds. So that's a challenge, is shifting that mindset. But if you do that on this marathon, you will have these long-term, sustainable, real access to justice programs.
Thank you very much for that, Bruce. Professor Jeff, please chime in.
I want to strongly agree with that. I think that there is, I talked about this in my pedagogy workshop, and I think it's very important to hold these two purposes in mind. We're providing access to justice, yes, but we are, in my opinion, principally here to teach students, and that the pedagogy is the principal goal, and that practice should serve the pedagogy. And I think that has some really interesting implications, because we will then design our programs around good teaching, and we will use our practice to inform the teaching, instead of having a classroom support a legal aid office. Now, I don't think that that's lowering our expectations. I think that's making them more precise and more excellent. We cannot be all things to all people in a legal program. I think what we have to do is focus principally on teaching. And then if we have a narrow, and I want to agree with Beth about externships. I'm specifically right now talking about clinics. Our clinics are necessarily going to be limited in their scope, but that is for good teaching purposes. And so I think that we have to be narrow in our focus, but we can be excellent in our producing really effective lawyers who then carry on the legacy of our work into those causes. This is true of externships as well. Beth is exactly right. Externship programs can do broader work with more partners, but I think the purpose still needs to be developing students. And so our legacy becomes not just how many clients did we have in our clinic, as Bruce wisely said. It's what are our students doing 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out of practice to affect their communities. We have a legacy of concentric circles moving out from our law schools. And so I think if our emphasis and our focus is on teaching, then that's going to inform every other decision that we make. And then my last note will be to connect it back to the theme of our panel. We then need to have really good referrals and really good partners in our community to care for our clients, because we may need to do a small thing, but our clients need many things. And so it's very important for us to have other lawyers to whom we can refer them, other legal aid agencies to whom we can refer them, mental health, physical health, housing, resources, all of the things that we can do. We have a legal aid clinic on Skid Row in Los Angeles, which is the epicenter of homelessness in the United States. It's in a shelter that shelters about 1,300 homeless people every night. Our legal aid clinic is on the floor above the Pepperdine Mental Health Clinic, which is just down the hall from the Southern California Nursing Clinic, which is just down the hall from the UCLA Dental Clinic. And they all have connections so that we can provide holistic services to our clients. But our role is principally to teach students through serving those clients.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Jeff. Dean Roseanne.
Again, making that allow me to mention our valuable resource, the law student practitioners. One of the challenges in maintaining the CLEP network is to have the best people working together, sharing the objective of not only providing legal services, but also enhancing and instilling in the students this feeling that they're doing something great. As I was talking to one of my students yesterday who presented his paper, Mr. Jare Gromea, he was talking about, I felt confident that I was a lawyer at the time of my CLEP experience. I think that's one of the most wonderful things a teacher can hear and know. That the CLEP program in its infancy stage has made someone feel better about himself. Not because he has the skills to be the best lawyer in town. That's not possible. He'll be an entry-level lawyer. But as an entry-level lawyer, he tells me that I want to do more. He starts with the program and the question in our assessment, and we do assessment, stages in our classroom component. What is important is to be able to, and as a challenge for all CLEP providers and law schools, how do you monitor the work of your LSPs? How do you monitor your supervising lawyers? I may be the head of office, but I cannot personally be with everybody all the time. How do you measure their achievements or the kind of work that they're doing? Because monitoring is every day do you go to work, every day do you report to your clinic, do you report to your CLEP provider. But when you measure how much work did you do in the 6 hours, 5 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes of interviewing a client? What changes did you make not only for yourself in terms of learning and applying what you had picked up in class, but how did you affect your client? I think your client comes first. But the client's rights and opportunities and protection will come first and will prevail where the student himself or herself is also adequately, and I learned this from Professor Jeff, prepared. You better be prepared, so that is preparation in class. So pedagogy is really important. Then doing the work. We monitor the work, we measure the work. And finally, we go back to the classroom and we do reflection, feedbacking. So how do we do this? In a sense that the students actually appreciate the beginnings of the CLEP program locally for us in the classroom first. We have orientation. In the orientation, what do they feel when we start talking to them about the beauty of going out into the community because we're going to do something good? What exactly is good? So that is one challenge. It's inspiring our law student practitioners. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dean Roseanne. Now that we've identified some challenges, can we ask what do you think are the important considerations in establishing the CLEP network in the Philippines? How do we start building this network? Can we start with Professor Jeff?
I think you're already doing it. This summit, the work, absolutely. The work of LEB, the Oversight Commission, the Asia Foundation, the law schools, the work that you are doing right now is the critical work. I don't think that you need to begin. I think you have begun. There's only, I'm very conscious of not saying that the Philippines ought to track the US model. The Philippines will develop its own communities, its own expertise, its own models, and you are already doing it. You are inspiring to me, and because you're doing it with intentional, very strategic care to do the work of development so that you will keep doing it. So I have no advice, just celebration. You are doing extraordinary work.
Thank you very much, Professor Jeff. About Professor Beth, what do we need to do?
I mean, I really echo Professor Jeff. You are doing a beautiful job. You are supporting each other, gathering, being thoughtful, caring about your students and the community, and being collaborative, which is, I congratulate you. So I will leave it at that.
Very much, Professor Beth. Professor Capulong?
Maybe I'll be a little bit more critical in my remarks. I think there needs to be two concurrent things that we do going forward. One is the bar exam. We need to deal with the bar exam because without reforming the bar exam, and I know that there are reformers among us, without dealing with the bar exam, the clinical legal education movement here in the Philippines and elsewhere, we have the same problem in the United States, will run into problems. In the US, we have a next generation bar exam that's coming out that's trying to address the competencies that clinical legal education is trying to bring to bear to law students. But if you don't reform the bar exam here, it's going to be a major obstacle. And then secondly, just the culture of law school. Again, that's why I'm a big proponent of clinical legal education from day one. From day one. There are many ways to creatively think about using the clinical method, right, in your civil procedure course, in your criminal course, et cetera. So I think we need to be creative about that because we need to change the culture of law school, not from this abstracted, I think it was Justice Singh who said this, from an abstract, perspectiveless point of view of the appellate court to the real experience of people and lawyers on the ground. So we need to change the culture of law school from that. I mean, think about it. Appellate courts are the institutions farthest away from the real life of people, right? I mean, respectfully. So we need to teach, if we're going to graduate ethical, skillful lawyers, we need to put them in that role from day one, just as medical schools do, right?
Thank you, Attorney Capulong. Bruce?
So thanks. And I'm mindful of years ago going with attorney Marlon Manuel, who many of you know, and we were in Malaysia. And Marlon told a story, and many of you may know it, but it's the story of the frogs in the well. And this is the idea, you have two frogs in the well, and that's where they live, and they look up every day. They look up every day, but this is their home. And then one frog gets out of the well and goes up during the daytime and sees a world, comes back down and tells the other frog what the world is. The next frog goes up at night and sees a completely different world. And they're both right. They're both right. These are the worlds. So what I'd say here is, going back to the frogs and you being frogs, being within your well and being within your local community or your national community here and sharing, but also, as we've mentioned many times, thinking broader and getting your vision. Everybody do this. Everybody do this. Do this. Everybody, okay. Right. And seeing what's going on and sharing within the Philippines, but also looking at the well and getting outside. And we've done this many ways. We talked about GAGE, these global Babsicle. We're going to start organizing next year in Chiang Mai, and then every 2 years, our organization is going to be organizing an Asia regional clinical legal education summit or conference. So you as frogs will get out, see stars, see sun, and share it with others. So I think that's a great way to continue to build your network.
Thank you very much, Bruce. We now invite the audience to please share your thoughts, or if you have questions for our panelists, please just approach the mic, or if your voice is loud enough, just speak. Anyone? How about our online audience? I hope you're still with us. I hope we're still 257 strong in AirMeet. Yes, Pa? Thank you. Let's have Pa from Babsicle.
Hello. Thank you. I would say it's not a question, but I would like to share, especially as a Babsicle who helps strengthening CE program, not just in Laos, but the regions and globally. However, I see the series summit that's happening now is a very good opportunity, especially for the national series programs throughout the Philippines to share experience within the nations. This is what we also do and help strengthening the CA program in Laos. With that said, talking about network, it is very important, especially I would like to share the experience that we support the CA program in Laos. And the network is very important, especially during the pandemic situation where everyone is staying at home, locked up, cannot do community outreach, community teachings outside. But we work with the series program. The first series programs that the FLP and also the FLA to do community teaching. Before they always do community teaching physically. But when pandemic happens, cannot go outside. So we see the challenge, and what Bruce said, we turn a challenge into an opportunity to work with the teachers, train them how to do community teaching online, and have the teachers train the student. And now they start using technology involving, these are all the skills that they can gain from the pandemic, and doing community outreach to not just when they cannot go to the village, change the community. Village community can be later because it's hard to communicate. They change to pick the community inside their own universities because they have so many faculties. So this is how we change challenge into positive way, and not just one of the faculties doing, but also bringing in other law faculties to see how everyone is doing. This is how we say the first CRE program in Laos is the FLP, bringing along the FLA, and also later on pulling the hand of the NIJs, all CRA campus, and all six, see how FLP is doing, and going forward, we'll start walking and alongside each other and move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pa. And of course, thank you to our delegation from Lao PDR for sharing your experiences with us also. Thank you. Anyone else from the floor or from our online participants? We actually have a question specifically for the Dean of the St. Louis University. I think this is about your program on community dispute resolution. Why have a separate or additional layer of mediation or conciliation separate from the barangay? This is from Attorney Chali from De La Salle de Lepa. In our Tanglao Legal Aid Center, we plan to embrace barangay and partner with our LSPs insofar as mediation or conciliation activities are concerned. Is this because in the Cordilleras, they have a cultural nuance in settling disputes? So this is about context, Dean.
Thank you. Well, just to provide a context, the reason why we proposed the creation of the Community Dispute Resolution Center is because we had seen that sometimes there's a challenge when it comes to mediating individuals, especially if the members of the Lupon are not really that knowledgeable about the provisions of the law. And this is also the reason why we conduct capacity building to different members of the barangay in the city government of Baguio. But when we thought of this dispute resolution center, we were thinking of reducing possible cases that will be filed in court through the conduct of another layer of mediation, just so there's a possibility of discussing the dispute within the legal context. And if we provide illegal context to the parties, there's a possibility that they might agree to certain terms.
Just so we could use those insights for our panel discussion, how do you think did your program, Community Conciliation Dispute Resolution Center, strengthen your network in Baguio City, your CLEP network in Baguio City?
Well, for that off, we had just created the Community Dispute Resolution Center this semester. So it's still at its infancy stage. And we will conduct a study as to the number of individuals who agreed to submit their dispute before the center and the number of individuals who agreed to not proceed with litigation. And so I will give you an update on that once we had reached that portion of the study. But thank you for that, Toff.
Thank you, and I apologize for putting on the spot. But essentially, networking, connecting to the members of the community really allows you to find a solution together, right? So this is the Community Dispute Resolution Center is one example.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you very much, Dean. And we have from Chancellor Zed, Dito Kalan. So we'll have one last question from the floor.
This is not actually a question, but I do like to give my final thought. We've been talking about pedagogy, and I think one of the things that separates the Philippine legal education and that in the United States is you still have this dichotomy of the podium professors and the clinical professors. In the Philippines, it's the other way around. And I think this is the need for us to change the mindset because we already have the framework for the clinical legal education program, which is now the mainstream that has shaped the revisions of the modular curriculum. The next step now in the Philippines is to shift from this mindset. All the professors in Philippine legal, or in Philippine law schools are theoretically clinicians because they are all practitioners. The problem is when they go to the classroom, they changed from a clinician to a podium professors. And I think that's where we need to change now, that they need to be clinical instead of a podium professors when they go to law school. So I think that will be the challenge of the law school now, to change the mindset that we are actually clinicians and not theoreticians. They need to bring in the classrooms their experience as practitioners, as judge, as public prosecutors, as public attorney. And if we do and we change that mindset, I think there will be an amazing transformations in Philippine legal educations.
Thank you very much for those beautiful words, Chancellor Zed. And before we end this panel, our last panel for the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit, we'd like to hear some last words from our panelists. Can we start with Dean Roseanne?
Thank you, Toph. The law school envisions our CLEP to be one that began small, will grow, will serve the community, will reach out to other regions, will actually make the impact that we desire and we want to see in our students. So as we say in our school, keep the faith. Have the willingness to prepare CLEP and to prepare good Christian lawyers. It is service to the country and to the community. That is the aim. We have to start small in our sense because we have limited resources. We look to externship because the externship partners, the CLEP partners, provided the resources that we did not have. But what we have in the law school is the very valuable resource of persons and alumni that made this program such a success. I started only in 2021. I already have the pioneer batch done with the CLEP program. I have the second batch already in the field who had taken their oath to be certified law student practitioners just this September. I am so proud. We have so much more law students looking forward to going into the field. And so as a final reflection, I'd like to say that we choose this professional career because we want to do what is right. What is right is relative to how we are growing as lawyers, prospective lawyers, aspiring lawyers, as clinical professors with all the hours, months, close to a year, 2 years of training. As the dean, also as a supervising lawyer, I'd like to think I am because I do talk to my students regularly. How far have I gone in terms of teaching them the practice, teaching them ethical practice? What do they see in me as a private practitioner too? Because leading by example will inspire the student. And that we must have that heart and conscience for justice, that unbreakable drive to promote the rule of law in all that we do. Congratulations to everyone here. Hello to everyone online.
Thank you very much, Dean Roseanne. Let's hear from Professor Jeff online.
Dear friends, it's such a pleasure to be with you online, and once again, I'm sorry not to be with you in person. This year or 18 months of working with your community, being part of your community, being welcomed into these conversations among Philippine law schools have just been a high honor. And I think that our work is just beginning. Like I feel when I'm practicing law with my students, I feel like practicing law with my students makes me a better lawyer. And I think that engaging in this work with you around clinical education has made me a better clinical professor. So thank you for teaching me and for joining this work together. And I'd like to, I think, echo Dean Roseanne and say this. The work that we're doing here is important. Democracy, the rule of law, human rights depends on access to justice and an expansive, inclusive access to justice in our legal and constitutional systems. And that depends on lawyers. For a system to work well, yours and mine and all of ours together, it must instill trust in the people who are governed, and that trust is really imparted by lawyers. If people don't trust us, they won't trust the system. But the system depends on our credibility, our excellence, our integrity, our moral core, our commitment to justice, and we impart that to our students. And I think we impart that to our students best in clinics. So this is really high work. It's a high calling, and I'm honored to be a part of it with you. So blessings on you all. Congratulations on this really important summit, and may it be only the first of many to come. Well done.
Thank you, Professor Jeff. Bruce?
Sure. I'd like to bring you back to when I talked about in the beginning about running marathons or finishing marathons. That's what this is. All of you are on this never-ending marathon. Go fast, go slow, do it many different ways. Don't be afraid of getting lost. If you explore different things, and absolutely don't be afraid of getting lost, because you're not getting lost, you're actually exploring new experiences. And by exploring new experiences, you're going to form and explore new community partners as you ask for directions. And think about the frogs in the well, go from here to here, and keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Professor Beth?
I will be quick. I just want to mostly say thank you. I had no idea where this journey would take me when Attorney Charm first reached out to me 2 years ago, but it has been a joy to be a part of this, and the last 3 days has really filled me with hope to see what is being done here. I'm quite confident that I will have the longest trip home from this summit, and I know that that hope will sustain me. I cannot wait to go back to my school and tell people about the amazing things that are being done here and the people I've met, so thank you.
Thank you, Professor Beth. Professor Capulong.
Yes, let me echo my thanks and pasasalamat bilang isang Filipino-American po. Naiinggan niya ako, nagpapasalamat, na natutuwa ako na ito ang kilusan ninyo dito sa Pilipinas. So marami pong salamat. And let me echo also what Jeff said and what our colleague here said. I think the movement here, the clinical legal education movement, is really a leap ahead given the revised rule, and also given that most of our faculty are practitioners. I think the challenge for us now is to turn those practitioners into clinicians, right? So I know that, we in the academy, we have this conceit that because we're good lawyers, because we're good doctors, because we're good academics, we're good teachers also. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. There are many of us who are naturals in what we do, but I think that we can train, we can have faculty that we can train in order to be good teachers, in order to be good clinicians, in addition to being good practitioners. So I think that's the challenge now, and I really look forward to joining you in continuing that work.
Thank you very much, Professor Capulong. And finally, Dean Tin.
We already started the fire. No, just the spark. Just the spark. Okay then. Okay. We started the spark, and I guess it's our job to create a fire and turn it into a wildfire. But that can only be done through collaboration among all law school deans, among law school faculty, among all law student practitioners. And I'd like to emphasize that the term today, my key word today is collaboration. And so I'm looking forward to more meaningful advocacies through the collaboration of different law schools nationwide. Thank you po.
Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po. I don't think I could add some more to what our esteemed panelists have already shared with us. But please allow us, on behalf of the organizing committee of this summit, to thank you for... Thank you, Professor Capullo. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise, and your warmth all throughout this conversation. And Professor Jeff and Professor Beth, it's so nice to have you in this panel, and thank you for partnering with us, working with us for the past 2 years. Bruce, and Attorney Capulong, we look forward to more collaborations with Babsicle and CUNY. And Dean Rosan, it looks like we have a lot of work to do. Yes. After the summit, we'll just sleep for a while and then let's hit the ground running when we get back. Again, maraming salamat po. This has been Building the CLEP Community panel, and that ends our last session for this summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toph. Thank you to our panelists. So the clear message is that law schools do not exist in isolation, right? So we go back again to the 3 C's that has been emphasized from day one: collaboration, cooperation, and coordination, which is actually nothing new to us Filipinos, kasi it actually is tapping into our bayanihan spirit, right? So great job, Toph. Thank you again to our panelists. Again, a round of applause to Toph and our panelists. For our online participants, how about a virtual applause and some hearts there? Thank you. And now, let's have some breathing space for our virtual participants. You can avail of your health break. We'll have a musical presentation from the Arellano University School of Law Singers, followed by the UP Law Cherry Vary. For our participants here, you can also have your break while we are being serenaded by this wonderful choir.
Isang ibig ang aking narinig, minsan na nag-inig, ating bansa'y umaawit. Isang awit, pag-ibig ang hatid, at musika'y batid sa bawat puso at isip. Ikaw at ako, tayo ay Pilipino, isang bansa, pati magkaisa. Isang dugo, isang lahi at musika, ang pangarap ko'y bansang mapayapa. Isa sa awitin, ikaw at ako, tayo ay Pilipino, isang bansa, pati magkaisa. Isang dugo, isang lahi at musika, ang pangarap ko'y bansang mapayapa.
like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion, like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match that I can make an explosion. And all those things I didn't say, cracking in bones inside my brain. And I'ma scream real loud tonight. Can you hear my voice this time? This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes, 'cause I've still got a lot of fire left in me. Losing friends and I'm chasing sleep. Everybody's worried about me. In too deep, still in too deep. And it's been 2 years, I miss my home. There's a fire burning in my bones. I still believe, yeah, I still believe. And all of those things I didn't say were cracking bones inside my brain. And I'll scream real loud tonight. Can you hear my voice this time? This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes, 'cause I've still got a lot of fire left in me. A lot of fire left in me. Like a small boat on the ocean, sending big waves into motion, like how a single word can make a heart open. I might only have one match, but I can make an explosion. This is my fight song. Take back my life song. Prove I'm alright song. My power's turned on. Starting right now, I'll be strong. I'll play my fight song. And I don't really care if nobody else believes, 'cause I've still got a lot of fire left in me. No, I've still got a lot of fire left in me.
When I fall in love, it will be forever. Or I'll never fall.
Okay, to all our on-site participants, we'll resume in 2 minutes. Again, I'd like to call in our on-site participants. All right, we're back. So again, I'd like to thank the Arellano University School of Law Singers and the UP Law Charivari. So again, a round of applause and appreciation to the law singers of Arellano University School of Law and the UP Law Charivari. We're close to the end of this wonderful summit. And this undertaking is not only a conclusion to the early years of CLEP implementation in the country, it is also a marking of a historical point that CLEP has truly arrived. And last night, in fact, we honored and recognized the honorees of the first CLEP Award. So congratulations again to all our schools, most especially the awardees last night. And for now, there are videos that we have to show, so let's sit back and watch the video presentation of the CLEP training program and the CLEP in law schools.
But I see it that as law school go through CLEP, they will fall in love with clinical legal education. They will fall in love first because it nurtures the ideals of this profession, the ideal to serve those who needed the service the most. Because that's the access to justice component of CLEP. And you have these thousands of law students who would be doing that and who wouldn't be infected by that, no? And I know they will go back to our roots, that is really service. So that the future of CLEP, people will fall in love with CLEP. Secondly, why will they fall in love with CLEP? Because they will finally realize that experiential learning is the best way to deepen your knowledge of any subject matter. You know, the medical profession is into that, right? But the legal profession, we're not yet into that. And so this is what is being given to CLEP. This is the future of CLEP. More law schools would be, in fact, opening not just one law clinic. I see that in the future, there will be more law clinics. And I know that the resources are very demanding. But when they see the love that is in CLEP and the knowledge, the deepening of knowledge that CLEP will offer the law students, they will give their resources for clinical legal education with love, no longer because they are compelled to do so.
I am hoping that CLEP will be mainstream in the same way that we talk about, remedial law, criminal law, political law being part of the mainstream of legal education in all law schools all over. I'm hoping that CLEP will not be a distant relative and always trying to get inside the house. I'm hoping that CLEP will be mainstream and will be considered as a legitimate expression of pedagogy in our law schools. And I see that in the roots of the Supreme Court on externship as well as clinical education, as well as the efforts of the Legal Education Board to bring them into reality. It's a really great first step. Of course, there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm hoping really that this experiment with clinical education will continue to be developed, and that this experiment will eventually lead us to mainstream clinical programs, clinical education, as part of our curriculum in legal education.
The future of CLEP is just so bright. In terms of if you read the revised law student practice rule, it's really to provide more access to justice. And I think with the presence of different law schools all over the country, it will really bridge that gap. And I would like to suggest that we do collaborations from between and among law schools in order collaborations on best practices, collaborations and maybe sharing of cases, for example, wherein we will be able to access resources, we'll be able to access different kinds of expertise from the different law schools all over the country. And I think that would be great.
We will be able to build a community of learners and practitioners that would be able to come together. It's not a one-size-fits-all how we'll be able to solve our problems, but definitely the experiences of different communities, of different law schools, of different programs, when you bring them all together, this is where that community of learners are able to exchange what are good practices, what can be done, what worked in one way, where are the commonalities, how can we further improve what is already there, and that will build as well better community of practitioners. And that's the beauty of this being lodged in law schools, because we are able to influence and we are able to open our minds because we're learners, but we are able to shape the practice of law.
I hope that the community will continue with the sharing of best practices, that this be a regular thing, maybe quarterly when clinicians would gather together. Now, we already have technology for that. We don't need to travel. We can just meet and share best practices. And maybe not just best practices, share our challenges. Share our challenges, the burden of administering a clinical legal education program, because everything always have their challenges, problems, and burden. But when we share it, we are able to maybe not find a solution, but lighten the load, no? Because there's somebody listening to you. So that's what I see, the development of a family of clinicians who would meet regularly to share their stories.
CLEP, as envisioned in the country, is really one of its kind. I think the first in the world, the kind that is institutionalized by the Supreme Court in the law schools and married with as a requirement in the bar examination. So as a program in itself, we know that it's going to be here for long and it will be very stable. And so it has a really promising future when we envisioned it back in 2019 after our 2018 visit in the US. But now, more than just the promise, we are seeing CLEP really to offer so much. I mean, even exceeding our expectations. We see a lot of law schools doing myriad of activities, not just focusing, for instance, in appearances in court as traditionally conceived of as part of CLEP, but now they're doing a lot of work bringing the law closer to the people, making it understandable by everyone. And so the future of CLEP is really that of a meaningful work by the law schools to the community. So we hear a lot of excitement. We see a lot of work being done by all law schools. So this is a common shared experience. And so what only needs to be done moving forward is for us to keep on sharing lessons, best practices, experiences, so that this CLEP that was but 3 years old actually will exhibit that maturity that is really far beyond its years.
You will have more active engagement of students in a way that they're able to analyze issues really and supporting the schools and also the overall justice system.
This summit could not have been established without the critical partnerships between the key stakeholders of legal education and justice, with the Legal Education Board and the Supreme Court on one hand, the students and the law schools on the other. Let us then listen to a message from the President of the Philippine Association of Law Schools, who have similarly been at the forefront for clinical legal education in the country. Everybody, please let us all welcome Dean Gemilito Festin, the President of the PALS.
Thank you for the introduction, Attorney Charm. Good morning, everyone. I would like to offer the warmest greetings to the Chief Justice Alexander Esmundo, Associate Justice Philomena Singh, Associate Justice Marvin Leonen for their never-ending efforts in spearheading the implementation of the clinical legal education program in the Philippines. I would also like to recognize the indispensable participation of the Supreme Court of the Philippines as the primary mover of this innovation to the Oversight Committee for the implementation of the revised Rule 138A. Attorney Ana Marie Melanie Trinidad, the Chair of the Legal Education Board, and the Commissioners for their awe-inspiring leadership in revolutionizing legal education in the Philippines. The Asia Foundation for making the summit a resounding success by providing one of the best discourses we've seen in a while, especially with the conduct of clinical legal education in the context of the Philippines. The Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs of the United States for pledging their solidarity with the aims of this project. The deans of law schools who have shared their experiences and best practices in the implementation of the CLEP in the respective universities such as the Ateneo de Naga University, University of San Carlos, Father Saturnino Urios University, Mindanao State University, Ateneo de Zamboanga University, and the Association of Law Students of the Philippines for being a crucial partner in extending the purpose of the program to law students in all parts of the country. Also, please accept my gratitude for allowing me to speak before this monumental summit and letting me witness history as it is made today through the joint efforts of the participants. Congratulations on the success of the first ever Clinical Legal Education Summit. Also, congratulations on the success of the first Clinical Legal Education Program academic journal. And what a way to conclude the year on a productive note. This past couple of years went by in a phenomenal flash of innovative brilliance in an attempt at modernizing the study of law in the Philippines through the integration of applied and experiential learning in law schools. If this is not the renaissance of legal education in the country, then I don't know what it is. This clearly proves the strong will of the Supreme Court and the Legal Education Board in providing the best pedagogical approach to ensure that new lawyers come equipped with a practical and social readiness to tackle real conflicting issues. As a law dean myself, I project a rise in practical and procedurally competent lawyers in the future in aid of their duties as officers of the court, having experienced first-hand authentic legal work during their formative years in their own institutions. Please allow me to share my realizations of these past couple years using 3 points. First, that the legal education in the Philippines has undergone a revolution of sort in the revision of student practice rule and the implementation of the clinical legal education program. Second, that justice has never been more accessible than today. And lastly, that the law school's students and relevant legal aid organizations stands to be benefited by the paradigm shift in the study of law. For my first point, I firmly believe that we are in an era where law schools are no longer bound by the traditional mode of instruction in our law schools. As the president of PALS, I have witnessed how our institutions for the study of law have embraced the culture of alternative lawyering in aid of the needy. Even better, this philosophy has been espoused in that respective curricula, effectively transferring this practice to the law students in their care. See it as a kind of ceremonial torch passed on to every generation of lawyers in the country. And this is a revolution. The summit is proof enough that the field has now evolved into a more interactive and worthwhile experience for students compared to the stiff and robotic learning environment in the past. And speaking as a professor of law, I was accustomed to the conduct of classes, entering the classroom, picking out class cards, and letting the individuals I call as cross-examination type questions, which we have been adopting as the Socratic method as recitations. This is followed by examinations which consist primarily of essay type questions in an attempt to measure their critical thinking, substantive knowledge of law, and their capacity to determine the application. And a few sprinkles of multiple choice questions, and the measuring device is already complete. I trusted this method. I'm sure some of you may also identify with me. The sort of deviation from this norm only happens during occasional story time when I share my experiences in practice and out of court to inspire students to do good in their studies. But as time went by, it slowly became apparent that this method is only aimed at becoming bar ready. For the longest time, the focus of law schools has been to top the bar examinations, produce the most number of lawyers, most especially record the highest passing rate in the country. This custom fails to address the real world, which is inevitable for bar passers. Hearing our speakers, the honorable justices during the previous days of the summit, I realized that this growing dark cloud atop our heads as educators was what prompted the Supreme Court to issue the revised student practice rule. In this modern age where people are more sensitive to the realities of life, our law students are now law practice ready instead of just being a bar ready. Sharing my account as the president of PULSE and also as dean of PUP, Polytechnic University of the Philippines College of Law, allow me to share to you that our students are progressing in their preparations toward the real practice of law. I'm no longer left wondering how they will fare in practice as I have overseen them in their CLEP courses. Again, this is a revolution, an act of uprising to overthrow the decrepit tradition of bar-centrism and usher in the age of socially responsible future lawyers who do not only perform in the bar exams but also in public service. My second point is innately intertwined with the first, given that our pedagogical principles have shifted to a more hands-on approach and proven that this was a successful endeavor. Its aim of providing more avenues for access to justice has undeniably been felt in the community. And to emphasize this, the seminal Clinical Legal Education Summit has delivered an overwhelming amount of proof to this effect. Our student practitioners have made it possible to dispense justice in some way. Before the CLEP, only lawyers are trusted enough to preserve the rights of the people in judicial and even in administrative proceedings. However, the services of lawyers, although known as advocacy towards justice, come with an administrative cost. This significantly restricts the overall provision of legal assistance to the ill-fated, in violation of the fundamental requirement of access to justice and the courts by the Filipino people. Our lawyers' oath has bound us to delay no man for money or malice. Thus, in an ambitious move, we have now started authorizing law students to join the fight against the inaccessibility of legal representation in the Philippines with the full and even zealous assent of our various law schools. Our legion of competent revolutionaries has dramatically increased with the institutionalization of the CLEP. This resulted in a more learned hands providing legal aid to those who need them without sacrificing quality, soundness, and legality. We were also able to penetrate even the smallest unit of the government, the barangays, in spreading awareness of legal remedies and measures. Jail visits were also conducted in seeking decongestion not only in the penal establishments but also of the court dockets. More importantly, the alternative dispute resolution methods are introduced to our students, exposing them early on to our dream of becoming more of an amicable settlement-oriented society. We are familiar with the hackneyed phrase, two heads are better than one. In this case, a whole entourage of student practitioners and lawyers who provide quality legal aid and representation is better than one. And we cannot deny the spread of this noble approach. Access to justice has never been this accessible. For my last point, law school students, relevant legal aid organizations stand to be benefited from this paradigm shift in the study of law. As mentioned by the previous speakers, our law schools are now CLEP ready. This presupposes that they may have made the necessary adjustment and preparations in order to create the proper environment for our students on their eventual practice of law. This development ultimately inures to the benefit of law schools because this ensures that academic excellence is achieved while producing well-rounded individuals versed in the art of communication with aggrieved parties, the legally impaired, and the prejudiced in rights. Evidently, law schools have become vectors of dispute resolution and pragmatic practice of the law. For law students, this is a fresh perspective of their future and of the bar and the bench. I couldn't help but be proud as the constructivist theory of education has now penetrated our legal education system. As described by Jean Piaget and John Dewey, this emphasizes the integration of real-world activities into the classroom setting with the students obtaining knowledge by doing the application portion of their expected learning outcomes. In order to learn something, one must actually do it. For the relevant legal aid offices, this will also be a welcome addition to ensure that quality legal representation is available to the biggest number of Filipinos. These developments bring to us an air of hope, something positive to look forward to the next generation of Filipino lawyers. Before I end this message, allow me to congratulate you all again for putting together the CLEP Academic Journal and this summit for the diverse experiential methods of learning in numerous fields. With this, let me assure you that the Philippine Association of Law Schools unwavering support and commitment to make justice more accessible to everyone. Thank you very much at mabuhay po kayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dean Jim Festin. And now to the future. The summit would like to present the entire legal, academic, and justice community with knowledge products to further strengthen and support CLEP. Please watch this next video presentation as we launch the CLEP publications.
Welcome to the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit. CLEP at the front line, paving the way forward for greater access to justice through clinical legal education. Through the early years of the revised law student practice rule, we have seen how clinical legal education has become transformative in shaping not only excellent, but also ethical and socially responsible future lawyers. Members of the CLEP community have engaged in robust dialogues, explored strategic collaborations, and facilitated knowledge sharing among key stakeholders and partners as they continue to optimize the benefits of experiential learning in developing programs which are responsive to the justice needs of the communities. Today, the Legal Education Board and the Asia Foundation, with support from the INL and in partnership with the Supreme Court Oversight Committee and the Philippine Association of Law Schools, are proud to present the outcome of the rich exchanges through the 3 publications and knowledge products that will soon be essential in every law clinic's collection. The CLEP Companion is a compendium of courses from the CLEP training program. This includes modules from the basic and specialized courses of the online CLEP training program, the externships course by Vermont Law School, and the clinical pedagogy course by Pepperdine University. The First of 1,000 Voices is a compilation of stories of CLEP in the first years of the revised Rule 138A, covering thinking pieces and feature stories from the implementers of the rule. The Philippine Clinical Legal Education Journal features papers that have been selected among submissions from law schools nationwide. The CLEP Companion and the First of 1,000 Voices book shall be available online through the CLEP website starting December 17, 2022. Limited edition prints will also be distributed to CLEP partners in January 2023. The CLEP Journal is slated for launch and publication in the first quarter of 2023. For more information, visit the CLEP website at clep.leb.gov.ph.
So at this juncture, may I call on Chairperson Anna Marie Melanie B. Trinidad of the Legal Education Board to present the CLEP publications to the different legal education stakeholders, as well as Chairperson Trinidad will be assisted by the other Legal Education Board commissioners. I'd like to call them one by one. Commissioner Lorenzo Reyes, Commissioner Josefa Herrera T, Commissioner Alexander Dumpa. Also, I'd like to call in from the Asia Foundation, the Senior Legal Advisor. I'd like to call on Attorney Carol Mercado. And also, of course, from the CLEP Journal Committee, the head, the Chancellor of the Mindanao State University, Chancellor Alizedni Dito Calan. So on this symbolic occasion, the organizing committee for the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit and the Legal Education Board presents the CLEP publications, the fruits of the collaboration and synergy, the infused CLEP implementation to the following stakeholders. Representing the Supreme Court of the Philippines, may I call on the Honorable Judge Carla Funtila Abugan, member of the Supreme Court Oversight Committee on the implementation of the revised Rule 138A. From the Philippine Association of Law Schools, Dean Gemilito Festin, President of the PALS. And from the Association of Law Students of the Philippines, may I call on the Governor for NCR, Ms. Zerina Santos. So the CLEP Publications has 3 volumes. Publication 1, or the first volume, is the CLEP Companion, a compendium of courses from the CLEP training program, which is derived from the modules in the CLEP training program launched in 2021. There will be 4 volumes of the CLEP Companion. Volume 1 will be on basic and specialized courses. The second volume will be on the Law Clinic Executive Management. Third volume, the externships by Vermont Law School. And the 4th volume on Clinical Pedagogy by Professor Jeff Baker of Pepperdine University. Publication 2 would be the first of 1,000 voices, stories of CLEP in the first years of the revised Rule 138A, which is a portfolio with 11 feature stories, thought pieces, and essays from law schools, and other key stakeholders of the revised law student practice rule and profile of law clinics all over the country. These are perfecting practice, how the Legal Education Board aims to nurture the profession's social consciousness through clinical legal education, which is an interview with Commissioner Josefe Sorrerati, law clinics beyond borders, Ateneo de Naga University assistance to migrant workers in Damascus, Syria. In with the old, Baguio Law School seeks to improve access to justice by revisiting the culture of dialogue featuring St. Louis University. Lawyering as environmental and social stewardship, the vision of University of Cebu's Green Legal Clinic featuring University of Cebu. Inspiring the Lasallian lawyer for practice with a social conscience featuring University of St. LaSalle. Confluence, how circumstances and collaborations shaped the Mindanao State University Sarimanok Law Virtual Clinic, or the SVLC. Untrodden Paths, Liceo de Cagayan's unique approaches to advocacy. For him, the rule of law was made real, featuring the Xavier University Center for Legal Assistance, a call to collaborate, the referral network system, a case for interdisciplinary experiential learning, notes from a conversation with an advocate educator, which is an interview with now Vice Chancellor Joan Largo, and finally, the legal aid project of the Asia Foundation. And finally, Publication 3, which is the Philippine Clinical Legal Education Journal, which features research papers, reflections, and essays selected from the submissions of the call for paper presentations for the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit. The journal committee is now reviewing the manuscripts in preparation for its target launch in February 2023. And based on what we have heard from the video earlier, there will be limited printed copies of these publications for release, and which will be available for download from the CLEP website in the first quarter of 2023. So ladies and gentlemen, the CLEP, the very first CLEP publications, publication 1, 2, and 3, which will be available by next year, 2023. Thank you very much, and thank you to the chairperson and commissioners of the Legal Education Board. Of course, thank you very much to the Asia Foundation for always being very supportive of the efforts in the legal community. Again, thank you. Thank you very much. The first ever Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit is a product of the collaboration led by the Legal Education Board with the Supreme Court Oversight Committee on the implementation of Rule 138A, the Philippine Association of Law Schools, and the Association of Law Students of the Philippines, with support from the Asia Foundation and the U.S. State Department Bureau on International Narcotics and Law Enforcement. At the beating heart of this organizing effort is one of the pillars of legal education in the country today. And to give her closing remarks and to conclude this historic summit, may I call on the indefatigable and the always loving commissioner of the LEB, Commissioner Josefe Sorrerati of the Legal Education Board.
Charm, thank you for that beautiful introduction. Love mo talaga ako. Thank you, Charm. And thank you for your applause. This table over there. Okay? Honorable Ana Marie Melanie B. Trinidad, Honorable Lorenzo Reyes, Honorable Alexander Dumpa, Mr. Vong Sin Saya Vong, Honorable Carla Fontila of Bugan, Honorable Rigor R. Pascual, Dean Gemelito L. Fistin, Dean Ada Abad, of course, Governor Charina Cipriano Santos of the Association of Law Students of the Philippines, our beloved for all of us here in the organizing committee, Attorney Carol Mercado. Thank you so much, Carol. Members of the Supreme Court Oversight Committee on the implementation of Rule 138A, law school deans, clinic director, our budding Filipino clinicians, law students, guests, friends, a peaceful morning to everyone. Confucius once declared, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Centuries after, Benjamin Franklin proclaimed, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember. Involve me and I learn. And in 2019, the Philippine Legal Education Community proclaimed, we will serve by learning. And thus, the Philippine Clinical Legal Education Program was born. I would like to emphasize that CLEP is really a learning journey. And in that journey, we are able to serve our country. What makes the Clinical Legal Education Program under Rule 138A unique is it does not stop at deepening the learning of our law students, but allows them to realize their dreams to serve those they have been longing to help, the marginalized and the underserved. You know, I have been a dean for 15 years before I became a commissioner. And every time I interview hopefuls, law student hopefuls, because that's part of the admission process. When I ask them, why do you want to go to law school? You know, the answer of majority, nearly 90% is always, I want to serve with the rule of law. That is why CLEP is really their dream, not ours. This is the yearning of the thousands and thousands of Filipinos who believe in the rule of law. That's why they went into law school, because they want to know how to better serve the country by using the law. Being adult learners and having already finished a college degree, many of our law students are concerned more with the welfare of others than with their own security. There is a desire among them for courses. I thank Professor Capulong for reminding us that CLEP is a course. For courses that deal with substantive social problems so they can become involved, offering them an opportunity to gain valuable learning experience and at the same time contribute to nation building under the rule of law. Moreover, students approach the opportunity to participate in real-life cases with an unending enthusiasm, which inspires us jaded law professors, right? We are so inspired when we see our students learning under CLEP. The paper presentations, interactive workshops, and the results of the survey of the Association of Law Students of the Philippines illustrates this yearning to serve while learning. And may I also inform you, Dean Jason Barlis has just messaged me through Viber that they just completed collating the results of the practice analysis survey. Because we have really, as Attorney Capulong, Professor Capulong said a while ago, the bar exam is also one challenge that we have to face with CLEP. That's why the Legal Education Advancement Program went into this research and practice analysis, what is really needed on the ground. And according to Dean Jason, he just messaged me a few minutes ago, he told me, please share this, that among the law professionals, no, these are no longer the students yearning for learning, for serving while learning. No, I said a while ago, that's the yearning of the students. CLEP is really their dream. But this is also echoed by the legal profession. The survey that was just concluded, according to Dean Jason, said that of the lawyers who responded to that survey, all of them said that CLEP is the response to the gap between legal education and practice. There is a gap. And so, CLEP is not just welcomed by our law student, but also by the legal profession. Clap. And by the way, I invite you to I will digress. I invite you to the LEAP Summit, LEAP Conference. It will be on December 7 to 9. You can join online and on-site at Malcolm Hall. You just go to the LEB website if you want to join and register. The institutionalization of CLEP in the law curriculum is just 3 years old. But in these 3 years, we have seen 1,000 flowers bloom. Right, AVP Joanne Largo? Yeah, that's our what you call this, that's what Joanne always tells me. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. And Joanne, 1,000 flowers are blooming. We have been very ambitious. And so, I would also like to thank our fellow travelers in this journey who have allowed 1,000 flowers to bloom. And so for allowing 1,000 flowers to bloom within a short period, in the most challenging of times, we thank the Supreme Court for institutionalizing the CLEP by virtue of revising Rule 138A. Our special thanks go to the fathers of CLEP, former Chief Justice and now Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, and Chief Justice Alexander Gesmundo, for paving the way so that our law students are given the opportunity for an enriching learning experience while at the same time contributing to social transformation. Because of Law 138A, our law students, to borrow the words of one of our promising clinicians here, Attorney Ernesto Neri. May I borrow your words, Attorney Neri? You know, Attorney Neri wrote this very beautiful piece of what a lawyer is. You know, our law students would want to be engineers as well as social healers. That's why they love CLEP, because CLEP gives them the opportunity to be engineers and social healers. And so what do we mean when we say our lawyers are also engineers? This is not my idea. I would like to attribute it to Attorney Neri. According to Attorney Neri, lawyers are also engineers, and our law students would want that. They want to build institutions while learning that will persist across time and have a tremendous impact in the way we lead our lives. Our law students would also want to be part of forging laws and implementing rules while they learn, rules and laws that would essentially channel the awesome power of the state into our daily life. Our law students would also want to be social healers, to make things and people whole again. They are yearning for the opportunity to enter into the lives of the vulnerable and remedy it through the law. Those are Attorney Neri's words. And they echo what is in the hearts of all our law students. As we come to a close, I would like to thank the wind beneath the wings of the first Philippine Clinical Legal Education Summit. I want to acknowledge this very beautiful and compassionate lady who is leading CLEP, leading LEB. Because if not for her, not for giving, all our staff are here. Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair Melanie, for giving, LEB has a lot of other concerns, but our chair has given all for CLEP. And we thank Chair Melanie for that. And I also would like to thank the support of my colleagues in the board, Commissioner Lorenzo Reyes, Commissioner Salex Alibugha, and the youngest commissioner, Commissioner Alexander Dumpa. And by the way, Alex is the vice chairperson of the organizing committee of this summit. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you to the Department of State Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, the Asia Foundation, our family. This is the pillar of the CLEP family in the country, the Asia Foundation. Thank you so much. Carol and Attorney Chudney, I hope you're listening, our fairy godmother. The Philippine Association of Law Schools. Without the Philippine Association of Law Schools, starting from Dean Joan. Dean Joan was the president, Dean AVP Joan was the president at the time CLEP was introduced in the law school. Then there was Dean Mari and then Dean Jim. Thank you for your help. And the Association of Law Students of the Philippines. Did you know that they were the ones who suggested that we should have that survey on CLEP? To hear the voices of the students. And the result of the survey was very comforting because we now have really data, scientific data, that indeed it's not just anecdotal, that the students are really yearning and and have welcomed CLEP. So thank you, ALSP, for that. Our gratitude to all our guest speakers, panel discussants, presenters, and summit participants on-site and online. Hi, online friends. How I wish I could hug all of you. 200 of you plus. I would like to say salamat kaayo to the people behind the scene who started working for this activity as early as the last quarter of 2021. These people were working as early as last year. And allow me to individually call their names and acknowledge them. The members of the organizing committee, Dean Christine Carantes Elvenia, Dean Domnina Rances, Mr. Guillier Christopher Lamog, hi Toff of TAF, okay. Miss Alexis Vien Regala, the president of ALSP. Of course, our Executive Officer, Attorney Aaron Mark Misa Di Maano. I would also want to thank the Summit Secretariat from the LEB side, Mr. Rodrigo Sagom. Walang tulog to. Itong mga tao. Gabriel Matola, John Ralph Luna, Alexandra Ann Buenaobra, Bian Camel Monforte, Gabriel Thomas Garcia, Mark Benedict Sampaga, Darrell Hansel Pastor, Daniel Angelo Rasos, and the Summit Secretariat from the Asia Foundation side, of course, headed by our most loving Attorney Carol Mercado, Attorney Ruel Rialin, Nikki's at the back. That's why we have airmate Nikki, Veronica Cruz, Samuel Pipito, Ruth Bandong, and I did not forget you, our expert resource persons, led by Associate Justice Maria Filomena Dising, our Judge Rigor R. Pascual, our very own Judge Carla Fontila Abugan, these two people really worked for the revision of the Rule 138A. So these are the two persons. Oh, ba't mo ako dinidilatan? Totoo naman na kayong dalawa talaga, no? So we owe a lot to these two judges. At the time they were working on this, they were not yet judges. And now they are judges. So thank you very much, Judge Rigor and Judge Lala. And how will I ever forget the woman who would love to always see 1,000 flowers bloom, the Assistant Vice President for Academic Affairs of USC, Joanne Largo. Thank you, Joanne, for continuing to inspire us. Okay. And now, of course, how could I forget the intellectual friend that we have, the one who reminds us that there is a pedagogy in clinical legal education. The chairman of the Journal Committee, Chancellor Zed Ditukalan, said thank you. Zed was the one who introduced to us the Backrate report, the Carnegie report. If not for Zed, we wouldn't have also read that report. Thank you so much, Zed. All those reports has contributed to what CLEP is now in the Philippines. Thank you so much. And also, we would like to thank the members of the Journal Committee, Dean Hardy Akande of Bicol University, and Dean Gil de los Reyes of De La Salle University. And there are two individuals, one is online and the other one is now on site, who was brave enough to embrace us and to hold our hands and to journey with us as we took our baby steps into a whole new world of clinical pedagogy. Professor Beth Lucker, thank you so much. Professor Jeff Baker, thank you so much. How I wish you were here. Okay. We also thank our law deans, law school administrators, law faculty, and supervising lawyers who embraced CLEP and did the hard work to make CLEP work despite the presence of COVID and other logistical and administrative challenges. Can we give our law deans, law school administrators, and law faculty a big round of applause? And we thank, last but not least, our beloved students, the reason why we have CLEP, for inspiring us with your passion for learning and serving. Thank you so much, dear law students. Legal education and our justice system face daunting challenges. But I believe that where CLEP blooms, so does hope. Maraming salamat po at maligayang Pasko at manigong bagong taon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Com Jojo, for that very inspiring message. And that concludes our summit. We thank everyone here in the Grand Hyatt and all our 240 plus participants online. Thank you very much for joining us in this very historic summit. Again, this is only the first, and there will be many more activities in order to provide an enriching experiential education to all our law students. So we congratulate all our presenters, panelists, and awardees. So again, to all our online participants, thank you very much. We hope you're here with us, pero syempre, we're still in the pandemic, but hopefully in the next activities, you will be able to join us. Thank you. So, for the on-site attendees, before you leave, we will ask for a photo to memorialize this event. And I was just given this message for the on-site participants, those who are checked in. The checkout will be from 12 to 1:30 p.m. And after we close, lunch will be served at the 5th floor at the Grand Salon. So you still have time to check out, again, 12 to 1:30 p.m. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. So I hope this is a very enriching experience for all of us. So thank you very much. And in behalf of my co-hosts, Dean Ada and Dean Schwade, again, this is Attorney Charm signing off for today. Thank you. So again, our on-site participants, please, for a photo session, would like to again ask our very important guests, Chairperson Trinidad of the LEB, together with the LEB commissioners, as well as our guests, Professor Beth Lucker, thank you, and Professor Kapulong, and all our attendees and participants, please join us here in front. Of course, Bruce and our delegation from Lao PDR, thank you for participating in this event and sharing your experiences in Lao PDR and Babs